Imagine a mind-blowing scenario. You walk into a multi-billion-dollar skyscraper. At the very top of the building, your name is cast in giant steel letters, gleaming against the skyline. Yet, the moment you step into the main lobby, all you receive is cold indifference and condescending stares. People look you up and down, judge your simple clothes, and order you to sit in the hallway and wait like a beggar who wandered into the wrong place. But what they don't know is that the simply dressed black woman they just turned away is the actual owner of this tower. She holds 51% of the shares and commands ultimate authority over the entire corporation. And their fatal mistake was making her wait. Because during those exact 30 minutes sitting in the hallway, she silently activated a lethal clause, a secret legal weapon powerful enough to wipe out the entire treacherous executive board, strip away their wealth, and plunge them into the depths of humiliation. Welcome back. Get ready, because right now, we are stepping into one of the most suffocating and thrilling corporate purges you have ever heard. This is the journey of Natalie Samuel to reclaim her empire, the Iron Woman who turned her enemies' contempt into her most devastating weapon. The morning sky over Atlanta was crystal clear and still, but on the ground, the bustling rhythm of a new workday had long begun. Amidst the hurried crowd rushing past each other on the sidewalk, a black woman stood quietly, completely detached from the noise of the surrounding world. It was Natalie Samuel. She wore a simple, sharply tailored black suit, carried no designer handbag, and wore no flashy jewelry except for a thin gold watch hugging her wrist. If you just glanced at her, no one would ever guess that this modest woman was a billionaire, a living legend in the clean energy industry. Natalie tilted her head slightly, her gaze fixed on the top of the gleaming glass and steel skyscraper directly ahead. There, giant stainless steel letters shone under the sun, Samuel Tower. Her lips twitched slightly, a complex expression blending deep pride with an invisible ache. People often say that when you pour your youth into building an empire, your name becomes immortal. But they never tell you that those glamorous glass walls can so easily erase the memory of the very person who laid the first brick. The reflection of Samuel Tower sparkled in Natalie's calm eyes. On the surface, everything seemed the same, still the symbol of everything she and her soulmate, Randy Webb, had built together. But deep within a founder's sharp intuition, she could feel the rot creeping inside. Standing before the tower that bore her name, memories rushed back into Natalie's mind like a slow-motion film. Those were the days of starting out in a cramped, suffocating rented garage in the suburbs. The place was cluttered with coils of wires, circuit boards, and crude solar battery prototypes. She remembered the radiant smile of Randy, a white man from the remote countryside of Montana. Unlike the investors who always looked at her with scrutiny, Randy never once, not even for a split second, made her feel like an outsider. He always spoke to her with pride. "You're the visionary, Ari. You're the brains and the heart of these algorithms. I'm just a guy who knows how to read financial statements. The headquarters building in the future must bear your name." Together, they went from that impoverished garage, step by step, trading sweat, tears, and even blood, to turn Nexus Dynamics into a global powerhouse, a multi-billion-dollar force pioneering the cleanup of this planet. But life always has cruel twists. When Nexus Dynamics was at its glorious peak, Randy fell gravely ill. In the cold, white hospital room, his frail hand, filled with 4 needles, tightly held hers. His breath was weak, but his eyes were incredibly firm. He made her promise one thing. "Let them run it, Ari. Trust Jonathan Mercer and the team I personally selected. You've given your entire youth to this company. Please, step back and live a life for yourself." Natalie had kept that final promise completely. When Randy passed away, a part of her passionate heart grew cold. She decided to withdraw from daily operations. Although she remained the largest shareholder with 51% of the stock, she handed absolute power to Jonathan Mercer, the man Randy had personally mentored and trusted completely. Leaving the fierce business world, Natalie used her wealth and time to build new schools and establish scholarship funds for underprivileged black children. She traveled to new lands, allowed herself to grieve, and then healed. Above all, she chose to place absolute trust in those who remained. But she had no idea that this naive trust would be the most fatal mistake of her life. Everything came to light on a rainy night a few days ago, when an anonymous email appeared in her personal inbox. The subject line was just a single cold sentence: "They think you've forgotten." Inside the email were numerous internal documents, detailed financial reports with numbers that had been cleverly forged to deceive the board of directors. Attached were highly confidential memos bearing the Nexus Dynamics logo right next to the logo of Vortex Energy. Vortex Energy was not an unfamiliar name. It was one of the giant oil and gas conglomerates, a smoke-belching monster in the sky, the very industry Nexus Dynamics was born to replace. Natalie stayed up all night to verify everything himself. Every number matched. Every signature was real. Jonathan Mercer, the dignified CEO, along with Richard Hale, the COO she had empowered, were secretly hatching a dirty plan. They intended to sell off Nexus Dynamics to Vortex Energy at a price far below its actual market value. In return, those two treacherous men would receive massive kickbacks and lucrative personal shares in the parent company. They were willing to bury the company's legacy in exchange for their own wealth and luxury. The anonymous email ended with a warning as sharp as a knife: "They think you will never come back." They are wrong. And indeed, they were dead wrong. Natalie didn't call her lawyers, nor did she notify anyone of her visit. She simply closed her laptop, packed a few clothes into a suitcase, caught the earliest flight, and flew straight to Atlanta. The giant revolving door of Samuel Tower pushed a gust of freezing air-conditioned air into Natalie's face as she stepped inside. She slowly looked around. The magnificent lobby now felt completely foreign. The warm, dark wood paneling she had personally chosen in the past had been completely ripped away. In its place was a space flooded with stark white marble and tempered glass. Beautiful, sleek, but cold and soulless. And what caused a sharp pang of anger in her heart was the wall of honor in the center of the lobby, where a large portrait of her and Randy Webb once hung side by side, a testament to their friendship and great beginning. It was now empty. At the highest, most exclusive, and arrogant position hung only one single photograph: Jonathan Mercer. In the photo, he was perfectly groomed, smiling smugly as if he had shaped this empire from nothingness with his own two hands. Natalie suppressed a sigh and walked toward the reception desk. A young girl with elaborate makeup was typing on her keyboard. Hearing footsteps, she looked up. The receptionist's eyes quickly scanned Natalie from head to toe. From her overly ordinary outfit, devoid of expensive accessories, to her skin color. In less than 2 seconds, an invisible judgment was passed in the young girl's mind. This woman is nothing important. How can I help you? The receptionist spoke in a professional but noticeably indifferent tone. I am here to attend the executive board meeting, Natalie replied calmly. The girl raised an eyebrow, her face showing clear judgment. Do you have an appointment? No. I'm sorry, ma'am, but the executive floor requires prior authorization. You can't just go up there. May I ask who you wish to see? Before Natalie could answer, the chime of the VIP elevator rang. A young woman stepped out, her expensive business attire radiating authority, the name tag on her chest reading, Elena Vasquez, executive assistant. What's the problem down here? Elena asked, frowning at the receptionist. This woman says she wants to go to the board meeting, but she doesn't have an appointment, nor does she have an access badge. The receptionist pointed at Natalie, her tone laced with annoyance. Elena turned to look directly at Natalie. In the sharp eyes of the high-level executive assistant, there was not a single spark of recognition. This was understandable. Elena had only joined the company long after Natalie had left. In the narrow worldview of the young assistant, the middle-aged black woman standing before her could only be a tedious supplier or a job applicant who had gone to the wrong floor. Ma'am, Elena smiled with a cold, corporate smile. The executive board is currently in a highly important closed session. They absolutely cannot be disturbed. If you would like to leave your information or a capability profile, I will take it, and the appropriate department will contact you later. It's fine. I'll wait. Natalie's voice remained steady, unbothered. Elena looked flustered. She was about to say a few more words to dismiss her politely, but the deep, unwavering gaze of Natalie made her swallow her words. This woman's presence radiated an invisible but incredibly powerful pressure. Elena reluctantly pointed toward a row of leather chairs arranged along the hallway leading to the VIP conference room. Natalie slowly walked over and sat down. Her back remained perfectly straight. From her seat, through the transparent soundproof glass wall, she could see the entire layout inside the company's most powerful boardroom. 12 men in high-end suits sat around a long table made of solid wood. 11 of them were completely unfamiliar white faces, new pawns brought in by Mercer to consolidate his power. Only at the far corner of the table did she recognize an old acquaintance. It was David Mitchell, the chief legal counsel who had been with Nexus Dynamics since its inception. Right now, he looked tired and exhausted, his posture withdrawn as if he were isolated from the rest of the room. At the head of the table, in the most powerful chair, stood Jonathan Mercer, talking pompously. He gestured dramatically, his demeanor bursting with confidence. Beside him was Richard Hale, who wore the sly smirk of a thief about to steal a vast treasure. Behind them, on the giant projection screen, the black flame logo of Vortex Energy was prominently displayed. The treacherous deal seemed to be finalized. Outside in the hallway, employees bustled back and forth. Holding expensive cups of coffee and clutching laptops, they chatted and laughed, passing right by Natalie without anyone throwing her a single glance. She sat there, a lonely black woman. No name tag, no escort. She had been turned into an invisible person within the very kingdom she had created with her own blood and tears. Elena Vasquez walked past with documents once again. She glanced at Natalie, her eyes carrying distinct pity. That expression seemed to scream, "Pity this poor woman. Doesn't she know she's wasting her time in a place where she doesn't belong?" Natalie closed her eyes. She felt the full weight of erasure. The ruthless way those men made her evaporate from her own life story. The way this world, no matter how progressive it claims to be, still operates on cruel biases when looking at a black woman. Right now, she had two choices. She could stand up, turn around, walk away, call her powerful legal team, and get entangled in a dirty lawsuit lasting for years while Mercer and Hale escaped with hundreds of millions of dollars. Or she could step through that glass door herself, strip away their smug smiles, and remind them who the true master of this place was. Natalie had spent her entire life being underestimated. When she was a young girl in high school, people said she wasn't smart enough. When she was a passionate young engineer, she had to scream to be heard in a room full of conservative men who constantly wanted to interrupt her. When she was a founder, investors ignored her to negotiate with her white partner. She had learned a lesson written in blood. Let them think you are small. Let them think you are weak and harmless. And then, when they least expect it, you rise up and take back everything that belongs to you. She opened her eyes. She stood up. Her movements were decisive and powerful, leaving no trace of resignation. Natalie adjusted her suit collar and took long, firm strides toward the boardroom door. Inside, Jonathan Mercer was still laughing loudly, fully believing that this company was forever in his hands. He had no idea that the woman he had deliberately tried to erase, the woman his staff had just forced to wait in the hallway like a beggar, was standing right at the door, bringing a storm powerful enough to sweep his career into the abyss. Natalie's hand gripped the freezing metal doorknob. She remembered Randy's smile. She remembered the neatly handwritten letters from the young black girls at the charity who wrote that because of her, they dared to believe in their dreams. Without hesitating for another second, she pushed the door wide open. The hinges creaked sharply, tearing through the noisy atmosphere inside the boardroom. The heavy oak door swung open. 12 heads in the room turned simultaneously. Jonathan Mercer, mid-sentence, froze. His hand remained suspended in midair, the smile on his lips stiffening. 12 pairs of eyes, carrying a spectrum of emotions from confusion and annoyance to utter shock, locked onto the black woman standing proudly at the threshold. Richard Hale, the COO, was the first to regain his reflexes. He frowned and spoke in a sharp, condescending, and arrogant tone. "Excuse me, lady. This is a closed executive session. Who gave you permission to just barge in here?" Natalie didn't bother to answer. She stepped into the room, reaching back to close the door behind her with a decisive click, completely cutting off all connection to the outside world. Her gaze, slow and sharp as a razor, swept across each face sitting around the long table. Most of the people here she did not recognize. They were all puppets newly promoted by Mercer for easy manipulation. But when her eyes stopped at the end of the table, Meeting the face of David Mitchell, she saw he was trembling. His face was pale, devoid of blood, both hands gripping the edge of the table as if witnessing an imminent catastrophic accident. David knew exactly who this woman was. But he sat motionless, trapped between the brutal truth and his own survival instincts in this company. Mercer cleared his throat, trying to regain his usual elegant demeanor. He refastened his suit button and forced a strained smile. "Ma'am, I don't know by what miracle you managed to bypass security downstairs, but this is a highly confidential internal meeting of the executive board. You need to leave immediately before we call security." Natalie calmly looked straight into his eyes. This man, who was now using an evicting tone as if she were a wandering sleepwalker, had once cried at Randy Webb's funeral. He had read a deeply moving eulogy about legacy, honor, and the vow to carry the torch left by those who came before. He had tightly held her hand, promising to use his entire life to protect everything she and Randy had poured their blood into building. Yet now, the mask had fallen. "I will leave," Natalie said, her voice quiet but bearing the weight of a mountain, "when I feel ready." The words struck like an invisible slap to the faces of those sitting there. Richard Hale's jaw clenched in anger. The young directors looked at each other in confusion, wondering where this simply dressed woman got such arrogance. Right then, the door slid open, and Elena Vasquez appeared, panting with a panicked face. "I am so sorry, Mr. Mercer." This woman, she was waiting in the hallway. I couldn't stop her in time. "I will call security immediately." "Do it now," Hale barked. But Natalie had already moved. She strode along the length of the table, walking directly to the head where Jonathan Mercer stood. There sat a high-end leather chair. The most powerful chair. The chair that once belonged to Randy Webb, and before Randy, it had belonged to her. "That chair," Natalie said, her voice dropping but pronouncing every syllable clearly. "Who gave you the right to sit in it?" Mercer looked momentarily flustered, his eyes darting quickly before trying to maintain a false sense of authority. "I am the CEO of this corporation. I sit where I choose to sit." "You are the CEO," Natalie replied coldly. "Only because I allowed you to be." With that, she reached out and decisively pulled the chairman's chair away from the table. "This chair belongs to Randy Webb. Before Randy sat in it, it belonged to me. And based on the company's charter, written by my own hand from day one, it permanently belongs to me." Natalie slowly sat down in the power chair. A deathly silence blanketed the entire room. The 12 most powerful men in the company held their breath, watching the black woman who had just shamelessly taken the chairman's seat as if she were its true master. Because the truth was, she was. Mercer's face flushed red with humiliation and anger. "I don't know what delusion you are suffering from, or who you think you are, but this action is completely illegal. Security is on their way up, and I demand you stand up and walk out before I turn this into a lawsuit for criminal trespass." Natalie crossed her arms on the solid wood table, lifting her head high, her eyes burning with undeniable majesty. "My name is Natalie Samuel. I own 51% of the shares of this corporation, and I was just forced to wait in the hallway of the very building that bears my name, treated like garbage by your staff. So let me ask you all a question. In this room, who is the one who doesn't belong here?" The name, Natalie Samuel, echoed like an atomic bomb dropping in the middle of the boardroom. Numerous gasps of terror escaped. Natalie Samuel, the legendary founder, the Iron Woman whose portrait Mercer had silently removed from the lobby. Most of the young directors here had never seen her in real life. In their minds, she was just a name printed in old newspapers, a ghost of the past. She shouldn't and couldn't appear in the flesh, fierce and powerful, just as they were about to finalize the betrayal of the century. At the end of the table, David Mitchell closed his eyes and let out a deep sigh of relief. He let his hands fall from the table. His desperate plea through the anonymous email had been answered. She had truly returned. However, Jonathan Mercer, a cunning old fox in the business world, was not one to surrender easily. He had spent years sharpening his claws, consolidating power, cutting down anyone who dared challenge him, and building a board comprised entirely of obedient puppets. "Mrs. Samuel," Mercer spoke up, trying to force his voice into a calm and diplomatic tone. "All of us here immensely respect your great history with the company. But the reality is, you voluntarily withdrew from operational leadership years ago. The board and I have steered the ship of Nexus Dynamics since that day, and the profits on the report speak for themselves regarding our excellence. Seeing his boss speak up, Richard Hale immediately chimed in, trying to poke at a legal loophole. With all due respect, Mrs. Samuel, your current role, legally speaking, is merely a shareholder. And shareholders attend annual general meetings. They don't just barge into confidential executive sessions and make absurd demands. Am I right? Instead of arguing, Natalie reached into her worn leather bag, pulled out a thick folder, and slammed it down onto the wooden table. The sharp thud made several people flinch. What is this? Mercer asked, frowning. Your resignations, Natalie replied coldly. Hale burst into laughter, a skeptical and mocking laugh. Are you joking? Where do you get the authority to? I have all the authority in this world. Natalie cut him off with a steel-edged voice. She opened the folder, scattering documents across the table. Section 7, Clause 3 of the company charter, known as the Lazarus Clause, or the Revival Clause. This provision states extremely clearly that, in the event of serious misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, corruption, or actions fundamentally conflicting with the founding mission of Nexus Dynamics, the majority shareholder has the full right to directly seize operational control and has the right to terminate the contract of any member of the management team immediately without requiring the approval of the board of directors. The room instantly froze. The temperature felt like it dropped below zero. Mercer and Hale locked eyes, their pupils dilating. The Lazarus Clause. They had heard whispers of this ancient rule, buried somewhere under thousands of pages of original documents from the company's inception. But none of them thought it would hold enforceable power today. It was supposed to be a mere relic of the past. That clause has never been applied a single time, Mercer stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. It certainly no longer holds legal validity at this point. Then let's conduct a reality check together, shall we? Natalie pulled out her mobile phone, practically dialed a number, turned on the speakerphone, and placed it neatly in the middle of the conference table. The long dial tones rang out in the tense silence. A mature, calm, and articulate female voice answered. Central Board Management Office, Margaret Collins speaking. Margaret, it's me, Natalie Samuel. I want to immediately activate Section 7, Clause 3, Founder Authorization Code, Randy 0317. The entire room held its breath. The silence stretched for a few seconds, feeling like centuries, before the voice from the other end rang out clearly. Authorization confirmed, Mrs. Samuel. The Lazarus Clause is now officially activated on the system. All operational powers of the executive board have been frozen and entirely transferred to the majority shareholder until further notice. Do you need me to send an urgent dispatch to the legal department? Yes, Margaret. And notify my external legal counsel team. I want these transfer documents fully finalized and airtight within exactly 1 hour. Understood, Mrs. Samuel. Natalie tapped to end the call. She looked up at Mercer. The face of the man who had been bursting with power just moments ago was now ash gray, drained of blood. He looked like a wax statue melting away. Beside him, Richard Hale gripped the armrests of his chair, his entire body trembling as if the floor beneath his feet were collapsing into an endless black hole. At that exact climax, 2 large security guards in uniform appeared at the door of the boardroom. Mr. Hale, the leading guard said, "We heard you called for emergency security?" Like a drowning man catching a straw, Hale pointed a shaking finger at Natalie, screaming, "Yes. Grab her. Throw this woman out of the building immediately. She is trespassing and threatening the executive management." The 2 guards stepped in, but then they froze. They looked at the black woman sitting regally and firmly in the chairman's chair, radiating an unmistakable aura of royalty. Then they looked at the high-level white executives standing around looking miserable, panicked, and drenched in sweat. Intuition told them something wasn't right here. "You don't need to go anywhere. Just stay right here," Natalie said calmly, her volume not loud, but full of command. "I might need you to witness what's about to happen." She turned back to the table, opening the folder further, exposing the filthy truth to the light. "Take a look, gentlemen. These are confidential internal memos between Mercer and Hale, discussing in detail the dirty deal to sell the company cheaply to the oil giant Vortex. These are the financial forecasts cleverly doctored to prove our company was on the brink of loss in order to lower its market value. And this is the negotiation emails confirming the massive personal kickbacks worth hundreds of millions of dollars, along with countless preferred shares that these two gentlemen would pocket privately after turning Nexus Dynamics into a hollow corpse. And at the very bottom of the pile of papers, she pulled out a printed transcript, placing it on top. It was a detailed transcript extracted from a recording file. This paper was transcribed from a closed meeting these two held. Natalie's finger tapped slowly on the translation. Just the two of you, drinking wine together in this very building. You smugly thought these glass walls would guard your secrets forever. She lifted the paper, reading it aloud clearly, mimicking their exact triumph. Samuel will never know. She disappeared from this world a long time ago. We own this company now. Richard Hale's face distorted in extreme panic. He roared. Where did you get that? That recording was wiretapped. It's completely illegal. It will never be accepted by a jury in court. It might hold no value before a judge, Natalie smiled sharply, but it holds absolute value in this room. She swept her fiery gaze across the other executives who had sat silently like mice, complicit in their cowardly silence as they watched their leader sell out the company for profit. Did any of you sitting here know about this filthy plot? Did any of you have enough self-respect to stop for a second and ask, why is a clean energy pioneer selling itself to an oil conglomerate? Why are we deliberately trampling on every ideal, every dedication that this organization was born to protect? Not a sound answered. A few people lowered their heads onto the wooden table, avoiding her gaze. Others stared into a blank void, cold sweat breaking out along their spines. Only one person, David Mitchell, held his head high, looking straight into her eyes, his gaze filled with deep gratitude. Natalie stood up abruptly, planting both hands on the table, leaning forward, turning herself into a towering mountain dominating every enemy. Jonathan Mercer, Richard Hale, listen carefully. Both of you are officially fired as of this very second for a serious breach of fiduciary duty, a serious violation of the company charter, and conspiracy to defraud shareholders. You have exactly 30 minutes to pack your garbage and will be escorted out of this building by security. Your access to all internal data systems has been revoked the moment my feet touched the threshold of this room. Any intentional act to delete, disperse, or copy confidential company documents will result in the FBI handcuffing you and prosecuting you to the fullest extent of the law. Mercer's voice caught in his throat. He gasped, desperately clinging to the last straw. You can't do this. We have employment contracts. We have the best legal team in the country. Then go ahead and sue me. Natalie stood up straight, her gaze seeming to pierce through the soul of the man opposite her. But you should know one thing. At the exact moment your puppet lawyer files the very first petition in court, all evidence of your despicable financial fraud will sit squarely on the desk of every federal regulatory agency and every major newspaper in this country. The choice is yours. She turned to the remaining silent figures in the room. Anyone among you who has tainted your hands, participating in this dirty script, stand up and get out of here right now. The rest of you, who are not involved, we will have a private talk later. What I need right now is to find out, within this massive machine, who actually remembers what we stand for. From the end of the table, David Mitchell slowly stood up. He refastened his suit button, taking firm steps toward Natalie, walking past the pale, stunned faces of his old colleagues. He stopped in front of her, his eyes shining with relief. I am the one who sent that email to you, he said softly, his voice deep. I didn't know if you would come back. I thought everything was over. Natalie looked at her old friend, a rare warm smile appearing on her lips. You did the right thing, David. Standing up against evil right in its lair takes extraordinary courage. Near the exit, Mercer and Hale were being pinned by the arms by the two security guards, escorted out. Mercer turned his head, his face distorted, twisted in anger and humiliation. He screamed his final words. It's not over, Samuel. You've been away from this market for too long. You no longer understand how to run a billion-dollar empire. You will destroy everything with your own hands. Natalie didn't bother to reply. She stood in silence, watching the pathetic figures of the traders being dragged out the door. As the boardroom door slammed shut, restoring the inherent quiet, she turned toward the transparent tempered glass wall. Below her, the skyline of Atlanta stretched into infinity. This was the city that had embraced her crazy dreams, where she started from nothing, from hungry days, to build a great work born to heal the world. The brief period of being discarded in the hallway outside was a necessary splash of cold water, waking her from her slumber, showing her how much those men in silk suits had fallen and corrupted her legacy. Now, the cleanup storm had passed, but the actual work of rebuilding an empire on the brink of collapse was the real challenge. That shocking event could not be hidden from the media. The news exploded across broadcasting networks faster than a spark catching an ammunition depot. Within hours, financial television networks across the United States simultaneously ran the same bright red headline. Nexus dynamics in chaos after female founder resurfaces and fires entire senior leadership team. The stock market reacted immediately, with the company's shares plunging vertically. Financial analysts jumped in to dissect, speculating about hostile takeovers, brutal internal infighting, and painting a picture of the destined death of one of the world's most promising clean energy companies. On social media platforms, public opinion split into two fiercely debating factions. One side honored Natalie Samuel as an iron goddess returning from the dead, using the sword of justice to punish the corrupt elite. The other side sneered, calling her a crazy outsider, blinded by hatred and personal ego, ready to smash a money-printing machine. But inside the glass walls of Samuel Tower, reality was harsher and more urgent than the rumors. The crisis had not stopped in the boardroom. Natalie stood frozen in the corporation's cybersecurity center. Blue and red lights had out from dozens of computer monitors, illuminating her tense face. Beside her was David Mitchell, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He had stood shoulder to shoulder with her without leaving a single step since the moment in the boardroom. In front of them, a team of IT engineers typed furiously, sweat glistening on their foreheads. "We just blocked it in the nick of time." The chief engineer exhaled deeply, pointing his hand at a series of bright red alerts flashing continuously on the main screen. Someone remotely activated a self-destruct protocol, a mass data deletion command targeting the core server. They aimed directly at the highly confidential research files, the entire patent portfolio, and the analysis data of the next-generation clean energy battery core. If we hadn't promptly severed the internal network connection and locked down the physical servers, 20 years of sweat and brains from the research department would have turned to ash. Natalie's jaw clenched, her eyes sparking fire. Who authorized that damn command? The authorization signal was traced to Richard Hale's administrative account. "Ma'am," the engineer replied. He must have installed a remote trigger software on his mobile device before security confiscated it. David Mitchell slammed his hand on the table, growling angrily. That bastard. He intended to set fire to this entire house, choosing to destroy it rather than leave it to you. "No, you're wrong, David." Natalie shook her head, her eyes flashing with the coldness of a strategist. He didn't intend to burn it. He intended to use it as a bargaining chip. This data deletion command is just a petty coward's contingency plan. If the takeover deal with Vortex failed, he wanted to ensure our most advanced technology would be buried forever, so Nexus Dynamics could never create any product that threatens Vortex's oil monopoly. She took a deep breath, turning to command the team of engineers with a steely voice. "I want you to immediately conduct a comprehensive review and audit, checking every file, every corner of data that has been accessed, copied, or deleted within the past 6 months. And I want a detailed list of all individuals granted high-level administrator privileges. Don't just focus on the executives. I want everyone checked, leaving no one out." After entrusting the security system, Natalie walked out of the data center, heading toward the long hallway of the office area. The vast floor was eerily quiet. The storm of news had swept through every corner of the building, and most employees by this time had retreated to their desks. They whispered to each other in low tones, eyes glued to the news articles on their phones, deeply anxious in their hearts, not knowing if they would still have a job tomorrow morning, or if the company was about to be dissolved. As she neared the elevator area, a familiar figure stepped out to block her path. It was Elena Vasquez. But the arrogant appearance of the assistant from this morning had completely vanished. The sleek, confident shell of illusionary power had shattered, replaced by clear anxiety, awkwardness, and fear on her face. Mrs. Samuel, Elena spoke with a trembling voice, her hands tightly clasped together. Could I ask for a few minutes of your time to talk, if you have a moment? Natalie stopped. She looked at the young woman in front of her. Memories of the encounter in the lobby a few hours ago rushed back. The judgmental gaze scanning her body. The cold dismissal. The polite but lethal instruction forcing a great founder to sit in the hallway like an anonymous job seeker. Speak, Natalie replied calmly. Elena swallowed hard, taking a deep breath to find courage. I stand here to owe you my most sincere apology. This morning, when you walked into the building, I had no idea who you were. But the truth is my lack of knowing. Your name is no excuse, right, ma'am? The problem is, I used my eyes to look at you, judge your appearance, and gave myself the right to decide that you were an unimportant person. I decided that your time was worthless and that you could wait in the hallway forever. I didn't even bother to ask your name. A tear rolled down Elena's cheek as she looked straight into Natalie's deep eyes, continuing in a choked voice. I locked myself in the restroom and thought about that terrible moment all afternoon. I wondered how many other people I have done that disgusting thing to. Looking at them, judging them by their clothes, by their skin color, and crossing them off my priority list before I even know what value they hold inside. Natalie stood in silence listening to the late confession. She looked at this young girl for a long time. She was not the enemy. She was not evil. She was simply a derivative product of a toxic office culture that Mercer and Hale had painstakingly sown. A rotten culture where a few people wearing designer clothes are pampered and welcomed, while others are treated as invisible, where respect and power are measured by a glamorous appearance and false biases. You know, Elena, Natalie's voice rose, gentle but profound. You are not wrong for not recognizing me. A lack of information is forgivable, but you were wrong. Completely wrong because you looked at a human being and decided they didn't deserve your recognition of their existence. That is the exact venom you must extract from yourself. Not to please me, but to show respect to the next person who might walk through that door carrying brilliant talent, but lacking a sleek appearance like what you always expect. Elena nodded slowly, tears of regret and awakening flowing. I understand, ma'am. I truly understand. Very well, Natalie nodded slightly, turning toward the elevator. Because in the stormy days ahead, to rebuild this empire, I will need people I can fully trust. Courageous people, ready to discard bias to view this world with a different eye. Are you ready to become one of those people? Elena quickly wiped away her tears, stood up straight, squaring her shoulders with pride. Yes, ma'am. Starting from this very moment, I am that kind of person. In the days that followed, Natalie's office turned into a trenches. It was a long, grueling sequence of tense diplomatic calls, nonstop legal consultation sessions, and media damage control campaigns that suffocated the atmosphere. There was one matter Natalie decided she had to handle personally. She picked up the phone, making a direct international call to the CEO of Vortex Energy, a cunning tycoon named William Cross. He was a man who had built his fortune by using money to buy out, drain, and suffocate dozens of young clean energy companies to eliminate threats to the monopoly of the oil industry. As soon as the other end picked up, Natalie delivered a bucket of cold water without any hesitation. Listen carefully, Mr. Cross. That dirty takeover deal you negotiated under the table with Mercer and Hale is now officially waste paper. From this moment on, if your corporation dares to instigate, entice, or approach even a single technical employee of Nexus Dynamics, or uses any underhanded trick to steal our technology through intermediaries, I personally, Natalie Samuel, will use all my financial resources to ensure that every federal investigative agency and every gritty investigative journalist in this country exposes every single receipt, every single dirty tactic in your business to the light. On the other end, William Cross was taken aback by the strength beyond imagination of this woman. He tried to adopt a negotiating tone, throwing out sweeter bait, proposing to double the acquisition value, then pivoting to suggest a friendly business partnership instead of a hostile takeover. He even tried a veiled threat, when he saw smooth words weren't working, implying that a lone woman daring to oppose his trillion-dollar empire would bring deadly consequences. However, the response to those words was only a cold dial tone. Natalie had hung up without bothering to grant him a goodbye. By the weekend evening, the Stage 1 crisis had been temporarily contained. The stock market chart had stopped free-falling and began showing signs of stabilization, though red spots were still scattered. The data breach attack had been completely halted, and the humiliating sale to Vortex had been buried forever. Yet, after a severe illness, the body truly reveals its weakness. The legal battle might have been won, but the hardest and most painful work to rebirth the soul of the company was just beginning. Natalie spent the following days personally meeting each key individual. She sat down with department heads, top industry senior engineers, and especially longtime employees who quietly contributed, those who held the memory of what a great place Nexus Dynamics used to be. In those meetings, she withdrew, listening more than speaking. She asked them about the toxic transformations under Mercer's reign. She wanted to know exactly what values had been stolen, what seeds of creativity had been suffocated, and most importantly, what fragments remained of the original ideal she and Randy had nurtured together. The narratives she heard broke her heart. The mission to clean the world had been deliberately diluted. Breakthrough research projects on renewable energy had their budgets quietly slashed, lowered in priority, to make way for shallow commercial projects that brought fast cash flow but no innovation. Brilliant minds had been thrown out onto the streets simply because they were brave enough to ask questions that went against the management's will. The culture of free creativity, where every idea was celebrated, which defined the first glorious days, had been completely replaced by office political infighting, harsh class division rules, and a fear blanketing every corner. Yet, amidst those ruins, the green shoots of hope stubbornly existed. There were still talented engineers who accepted lower salaries than the market rate to stay, simply because they loved the ideal of the work. There were still quiet managers who used their own bodies as shields, protecting their subordinates from Mercer's harshest policies. And there were countless young graduates, carrying hot blood in their hearts, joining the company because they yearned to use science to change the world. And they still held a fierce belief that one day, the light would return. After grasping the core situation, Natalie did not hesitate to make a pivotal decision. She officially appointed David Mitchell as temporary CEO. This choice met no opposition. He was a man possessing deep knowledge of the company's complex organizational structure, with sharp legal expertise to deal with Mercer's remnants. And most importantly, he possessed an invaluable trait that this organization craved more than ever: integrity. He was the man who dared to risk his career, rising above fear to send out a distress signal, doing the right thing when no one dared. He was precisely the model leader Nexus Dynamics deserved to be entrusted with. That night, after all appointment papers were signed, Natalie sat alone in the quiet darkness of the old office that used to belong to Randy. City streetlights filtered through the glass windows, shining on the small, yellowed photograph she always carefully kept in her wallet. It was a photo of her and Randy taken many years ago, standing before the rusty iron door of the garage where they began to give wings to their crazy dreams. In the photo, two faces were smudged with grease, but their smiles shone brighter than any artificial light. Back then, they were proletarians. They had no money jangling in their pockets, no angel investors backing them, no documents guaranteeing success. They had only one thing: a fierce belief in a better future created by their own hands. Natalie gently caressed the rough surface of the photo, her voice whispering into the quiet night. "I have kept my final promise completely, Randy. I let go, allowing them to steer the ship freely. I gave them all the trust a human being could give. But my old friend, you also taught me another lesson, the lesson of awakening. You said that if one day those who remained were blinded by money, forgetting who we are and what truly holds value, then my job was to come back and remind them. So, I did exactly what had to be done. I gave them a reminder they will never forget." Exactly 1 week after the earthquake, the main lobby of Samuel Tower was packed with people. Thousands of employees gathered into a vast sea of bodies. And at hundreds of branch offices globally, tens of thousands of others were glued to the live stream screens. The entire massive space fell into dead silence, without a single cough. Everyone knew the legendary story by heart. The forgotten founder, the treacherous executives who planned to hand the company to monsters, and a brief waiting period in the hallway that sparked a historic purge. Natalie stepped up to the podium. She did not wear glamorous evening gowns, nor did she wear elaborate makeup. She remained the black woman carrying a simple demeanor but radiating an absolute authority. She looked out at the vast sea of people below. There were those whose hair had turned gray. There were young faces just out of school, spanning every race, every skin color. There were brilliant engineering minds, diligent accountants, a swift sales team, and the janitors holding brooms in their hands. They, rather than those sitting in cold rooms signing papers, were the ones who actually built the bricks of this company every single day. Exactly 1 week ago, Natalie's voice rose, clear, powerful, and moving, echoing through every corner of the building. I stepped into the lobby of this building. Not a single eye recognized me. I was stopped and politely asked to sit and wait in the hallway. I sat there, withdrawing, becoming an invisible person. And while I was humblingly sitting at the edge of the world I created with my own hands, inside that powerful boardroom, those who call themselves the elite leadership of this company were clinking glasses, laughing merrily, and signing agreements to cheaply sell out and destroy everything we had to sweat and bleed to build. She paused for a beat, letting the weight of each word settle into the minds of the tens of thousands of people listening intently. The time I had to wait in that hallway was actually not too long. The clock only ticked away a few dozen minutes. But for me, it was long enough to realize a bitter truth. This giant corporation named Nexus Dynamics has been consumed by the disease of amnesia. It has forgotten its own identity. Hear me. This company was never, and will never be, built on the morbid belief that power and wealth belong only to a small group of favored elites. It was conceived and nurtured by a provincial white man from the mountains of Montana and a poor black woman raised in the suburbs of Atlanta. Those two people, from two completely different worlds, had nothing in common regarding background, but they were bound together by a single religion. The fierce belief that the value you create for this world is 10,000 times more important than your background. That your quiet contributions matter more than your shape, your color, or the clothes you wear. She took a breath, remembering Randy, his smile as warm as morning sun and his unyielding, immortal belief that humans could make this earth better. Today, my soulmate, Randy Webb, is gone forever. But the noble ideal he left behind is not allowed to die with his body. I stand here, before thousands of beating hearts, to proudly declare to the world that this Nexus Dynamics Corporation is not my personal property. It does not belong to any arrogant CEO, it does not belong to the board of directors, and it is not a token on the negotiation table of scheming, manipulating shareholders. It is the blood, the flesh, the soul of everyone standing here. Those who are creating real value day and night. Those who wake up every early morning, despite exhaustion, walking to this place to work for a dream greater than their own selfish interests. Natalie squared her shoulders, lifting her head high, her eyes shining. The terrible time I spent in that hallway last week officially marked the end of an era of rotten, fake power. Starting today, this very moment, we will tear down and rebuild, beginning a completely new chapter of history. We will return to our true selves, becoming what we were always meant to be. A great organization existing to progress humanity, a common home where anyone, regardless of who you are, belongs, as long as you are ready to give your all. No one gave a signal, but from within the crowd, a timid applause rose. Then a second, then a third. Within seconds, it exploded into a hurricane. A wave of clapping, cheering, and whistling echoed, resonating, shaking even the solid glass walls of the grand lobby. Natalie did not flash a triumphant smile. She simply nodded in acknowledgement to the crowd, waved gently, and stepped back from the podium, leaving the stage to the light. This ovation was not the destination, but merely the starting gun. The actual war to restore the company had just begun. A month passed, the flow of time softening the wounds. The crisis had been pushed into the past. The corporation's stock not only recovered strongly, but shattered previous growth records, as the market witnessed the return of a transparent and ambitious leadership vision. David Mitchell had passed the trial period, confirmed as the official CEO. Under Natalie's counsel, he conducted a comprehensive overhaul. The entire senior leadership team was replaced, rebuilt with elite individuals carefully selected based on practical competence and unshakable integrity, smashing the culture of cronyism, advancement through relationships, or glamorous appearances. And at the magnificent lobby of Samuel Tower, the Wall of Honor was restored to its sacred value. No longer was there a magnified personal photo of anyone. Instead, a simple oak frame hung solemnly in the center position. Inside the frame was the small photo yellowed by time. The photo of Natalie Samuel and Randy Webb standing with their arms around each other's shoulders, smiling radiantly in front of a shabby, grease-stained garage in the suburbs of Atlanta. Beneath the protective glass, brass letters engraved an eternal inscription, founded by Natalie Samuel and Randy Webb. One late afternoon, Natalie was pacing through the lobby, preparing to leave the company after a long day of work. From afar, she saw a figure standing quietly before the Wall of Honor. It was a young girl. She had glossy black skin, and around her neck hung a brand new employee badge, proving she had not joined the company long ago. The girl stood there, hands clasped behind her back, her bright eyes intently looking at the historic photo with fascination, as if absorbing strength from it. Hearing the sound of heels tapping on the marble floor, the girl turned her head. Her gaze met Natalie's face, standing a few steps away. An electric current ran down her spine, and the young girl exclaimed, her tone blending immense respect and utter adoration. It was not a questioning doubt, but a solid affirmation. You are Natalie Samuel. Natalie stopped, smiling kindly. Yes, that's me. The girl took a deep breath, her eyes welling with emotion. I have read every article about your story. About the day you returned here. Ma'am, I just graduated with honors in new materials engineering. I turned down countless offers from other major corporations and applied to this company. Because of you. I came here for what you fought to win back. Natalie came closer, looking deep into the dark, aspiring eyes of the young engineer. Standing before her was not just a new employee, but a reflection of herself decades ago. This girl was the embodiment of the next generation, the young people full of aspiration who would carry the flag of the ideal, continuing this bumpy path after she completed her mission and truly stepped back. Then, Natalie spoke warmly, placing her hand gently on the young girl's shoulder, transferring an invisible source of strength to her. Promise me one thing. Strive with all your might, and ensure that when the wheel of time turns, and one day you gain the right to sit in the highest leadership chair of this place, you will never, absolutely never, allow anyone to wait in the dark hallway, just like the way they once forced me to wait. She smiled, her eyes filled with hope. You must use your heart to see the lowest people walking through that door. You must ask their names, remember them, and treat them with the highest respect, as if their existence is the most important thing in the world. Because you know what? Deep down, their value truly matters enough to turn the whole world around. The young girl bit her lip, tears of happiness rolling down. She nodded vigorously, her voice resolute like a solemn vow. I promise. I will definitely do that. Natalie smiled with satisfaction. She let go of her hand, slowly turning her back, walking toward the revolving glass door. The brilliant afternoon sun of Atlanta filtered through the glass, casting gold upon the proud figure of the woman, who had rewritten history with her own hands. Behind her, the young girl turned back, continuing to gaze up at the old photo. She looked at the two great founders, the people who had risen from the very bottom of hardship, from absolute zeros, to shape a legacy that lives on with time. Just a miserable waiting period in the hallway, a moment seemingly the most ruthless dismissal, turned out to be the fire that consumed the corruption and permanently altered the trajectory of an empire. And now, the woman who was once forced to bend her back and wait was the one standing tall at the peak, personally painting the most brilliant strokes for the canvas of the future. The inspiring story of Natalie Samuel and the Nexus Dynamics empire concludes here. A truly complete ending, but its resonance and profound lessons will surely linger in our minds forever. Indeed, in this life, never be quick to judge or look down on someone based solely on their appearance, the clothes they wear, or their background. because you will never know what inner strength and great stature lie hidden behind that simple outer shell. What about you? What were your emotions upon hearing this story? If you were in Natalie's shoes that day, what would you have done when faced with being ignored by your own staff and forced to wait in the hallway? Would you have handled it differently? Feel free to share your thoughts and leave your opinions right down in the comments section so we can discuss together. If you loved this thrilling and meaningful story, please take a few seconds to hit the like button, share the video with your friends, and especially hit subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your enthusiastic support is an invaluable source of motivation, helping this channel continue its efforts to produce and bring you higher quality, more engaging storytelling videos in the future. Thank you for taking the time to listen and accompany this video until the final minutes. Goodbye, wish you a day full of joy, and see you in the next stories.